Kwai kwai ni dobak. Hello, my friends. In the Luis de Souza, Valadoke da Hozid. My name is Joseph, or the Peaceful One. And Dai Saratoga, Elanobizonbik. I'm of the area we call Saratoga, or the Medicine Spring Place. Taladalondekad, the Adirondack region. And Al Noba Nia, a human being is what I am. A member of the Nulhegan Band of the Abenaki Nation. I greet you and say hello. That song I just played on the flute is one of our oldest tunes. It's one that would be played for the children, for the next generation. For it speaks of the children, when we sing it, as being like the little pine trees that grow up beneath the big trees and are protected by the outstretched wings of those, the outstretched branches, the outstretched arms of those great white pines, so that they're no longer crushed by the snow or knocked down by the wind, but able to grow tall and strong. Thus, that song is played all around the Wabanaki nations of the New England area, our own Abenaki people of the Adirondacks and Vermont, and the cousins of ours, the Micmac, the Maliseet, the Passamaquoddy, and the Penobscot, further off towards the direction of the dawn. We call ourselves Alnobak, or human beings, but also Abenaki, which means people of the dawn land, for this area of the Northeast is our original homeland. When we speak of our land, we call it Ndakina, which means our land, a land that is shared by all of us, cared for by all of us, which cares for all of us. And so that land is a special and powerful place. This area is part of what's known historically as the Cateros Patent, which is a transfer of land that was made with the Mohawk Nation. The Mohawks are one of the people, the three nations, the Mohawk or Ganyenke Gaono, the people of the flint or the people of the stone, the Mohican or Mahican people, the people of the river that flows two ways, and then the Abenaki Nation. These are the three tribal peoples that most often were found in this region. In fact, on this range here, there are places where people would camp for the summertime, and they would then go to Saratoga Springs and sell things like baskets they had made to the tourists. So it's something that probably President Grant himself would have seen if he went to Saratoga at the time when he was at this cottage. The Cateros Patent, of course, was a transfer of land, but to our native people, that land has never been transferred. It remains our land in the sense that it is part of us. We are responsible for it, something we hope that all human beings will understand. One of our oldest stories that is told among the Abenaki people is that long ago, the one we call Gluskomba, the one who shaped himself, the one who was the first to speak and tell stories, made this land by moving about on it, by making mountains rise, by pushing up, by making rivers, by drawing his fingers down through what later became those mountains. Among the Haudenosaunee, the Mohawk Nation, the story they tell of the creation of this area, what we call Turtle Island, or North America, is a story I learned many years ago, and I credit such people as Dahana Dolans, Ray Fadden, for helping me deepen my understanding of stories such as this. So now, I will tell you that Haudenosaunee creation story, followed by the Mohican story. Long ago, before this earth was here as it is today, there was only water. And in that water, there were birds and animals that swam about. Now high above, there was another place, a skyland. And in that skyland, there were ancient beings living in the shape of human beings. Their life was good, for in the center of that skyland grew a great tree. From that tree, a sweet scent always emanated, and food that was good to eat came from that tree. The seeds of that tree hung down, and that tree itself was the center of the skyland. One day, though, something happened. The wife of that chief had a dream. In her dream, she saw the great tree uprooted and placed on its side. When she told her dream to her husband, he said to her, "My wife, your dream is strong. We must make it true." And so it was. The great tree was uprooted and placed on its side. And where it had been, there was now a great hole in the skyland. And if you looked down far below, you could see the blue glitter and gleam of water. Everyone crowded around that hole to see what they could see below. And the one who was the most curious of all to see this was that wife of the sky chief. Even though she was expecting a child, she pushed her way to the front to look over and look down into that hole in the skyland, and then something happened. There are different stories about how it happened. Some say she leaned over so far, holding on to the tip branches of that uprooted tree where there were seeds hanging down, that she slipped and fell. Some say she saw down below and realized what she needed to do was go to those places, to those who would be there, and so she leapt. And others say that someone was upset because of the tree being uprooted and that she was pushed. Whatever the case may be, she fell through that hole, began to fall towards the waters far below. Now in those waters, the birds and the animals in that water looked up, and they said to each other, someone is coming. She looks like she's in trouble. We'd better help her. And so it was that the swans, some say the geese, flew up and caught her on their wide wings, on their backs, and began circling above the water because there was no place for her to stand. Now those other water creatures said, that one who is coming, yes, that one who is coming, she does not seem to have webbed feet. Oh no, I don't think she could swim so well. She must have a place to stand. But where could they find a firm place to stand? That is when one of them, I'm not sure which, but one of them remembered that far below the water there was something called earth. Maybe they could dive down and bring up some of that solid earth for her to stand on. So they began to try to reach the bottom. One of the first to go, they say, was the duck, who dove down, but that duck could not get to the surface, from the surface to the bottom of that water, and floated back up. Next was the beaver with his broad tail. Beaver went even deeper, but also did not reach the bottom. The loon with its wide wings swam as if flying deeper than the other two had gone, but also was unable to reach the bottom where that earth was. Finally, the smallest of the water creatures, the little muskrat, said, I will bring up earth or I will die trying. That muskrat dove deeper than the duck, deeper than the beaver, deeper than the loon, deeper than any had gone, and reached the bottom, and just as it lost consciousness, reached out and grabbed some earth in its little paw and floated back to the surface. When it reached the top of the water, they saw that the muskrat was holding earth. They said, Muskrat's brought earth. This is good, but where can we put it now? This was a problem. For if you put earth on top of water, it just goes back down to the ground, to the water far below, to the depth. But that's when a voice spoke. Put the earth on my back. They turned to look. It was the great turtle who had floated up from the depths, and its back was ridged across like mountains and above the water, and they placed that little bit of earth on the back of the turtle and began to spread it out. As they spread it out, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And that woman who fell from the sky stepped onto that new earth and began to dance with small steps, as to this day Haudenosaunee women dance. And as she danced, the earth got bigger. And as she danced, she opened her hand, and seeds stripped from the sky tree fell into her footprints and grew up as flowers and bushes and trees. And so it is that earth came to this place on Turtle's back. And that is only the beginning of a very long, long story. Now, among the Mohican people, they say that that this land also came from the sky. But what happened is that a root from that sky tree broke off and fell down, and floating in the water, it became the place that was the basis for this earth. The turtle rose up, lifting up that root, and from that root everything grew. Among our Abenaki people, we say that human beings, in fact, came from the trees. Our creation story begins with the earth already in place. We say it was in the mind of the great mystery, Kitsinowask, that the earth was formed. And there it was, in the mind of the great mystery. And the great mystery, Kitsinowask, decided to make human beings. And so, looking around, saw the stones and shaped human beings of stone. Those stone beings were tall and strong, but their feet were heavy and their hearts were made of stone. And as they walked about, they crushed everything else beneath their feet. For there were trees and other beings, then they were all here before humans. We were latecomers, according to all of our stories. And Katsinawa saw it was a mistake to have made those human beings that way, and so returned them to the earth, broke the stones up. We say that's one reason why those stone beings were scattered here. We have so many rocks here in the Northeast, the remnant of those first human beings. And then, looking around for something to make human beings from, the Creator saw the ash trees and how they moved in the wind and how they were rooted in the earth, and shot arrows into the trunk of an ash tree. And each time an arrow struck, a woman or a man stepped forth. And so it is, we say among our Abenaki people, that we are of the trees and of the earth, rooted in this land, and our hearts are meant to be growing and green. That is how that story goes. I want to share with you another one of our traditional instruments. You heard the sound of the flute. The flute we call pekongan, the hollow object that you blow through. Pekongan. The drum is called pakholigan, the hollow object that is struck. And the sound of the drum, this double beat, is a sound you should all be familiar with, for it is the sound of the heartbeat. The first sound you ever heard was the beating of your mother's heart before you breathed or walked or saw the light. Even before you were born, you heard your mother's heart beating. And so the drum reminds us, always listen to our mothers. And also we say, the drum beat is the heartbeat of Mother Earth. So this is another one of our welcoming and greeting songs that I'm going to share with you now. You may have noticed on this drum the shape of a bear. Bear is one of the two primary clan animals of the Abenaki people, bear and turtle. And also that bear has an arrow into its body. This is the arrow of breath or life that connects all things in a great circle. And so you see the circle around the bear, the circle that connects us all. And the four directions, also we say this stands for the 4 steps we need to always follow. We need to listen, we need to observe, we need to remember, and we need to share. And thus we complete that circle by listening, observing, remembering, and sharing. From where we stand here on Mount McGregor, we are actually within view, although the trees block it, of the Hudson River. The Hudson River is called Mahikani-Tuk, or the Mohican River, or the River of Tides, for it flows 2 ways because of the currents of the ocean coming back and forth. And there are many stories told of that river, and I thought I would share with you today one that comes from Mohican tradition. And this story is a story that comes from a long time ago. A long time ago, it is said, there was a village of Mohican people living along the river, in a place where the river was wide and often the currents were very treacherous. It was impossible to swim across the river there, although you could cross it by canoe. And just across from that village, there was a large island, which is still there to this day in the river. Now there was a young woman. Her name was Swaying Reed. She was a very good-looking, a very kind young woman. Everyone liked her except for one other young woman who was jealous of Swaying Reed's popularity. And this young woman, Red Feather, decided one day she would do something about it. And so she came to Swaying Reed and said, "My friend, I would like you to come berry picking with me." Swaying Reed was pleased. Red Feather had never been kind to her before. And she thought, "Oh, this is good. I always like to make a new friend." And she said, "That is good. I will go berry picking with you." "Good," Red Feather said. "Come with me down to the river, for the berries I want us to pick are on the island." Well, Swaying Reed followed her. They went down to the river where there was indeed a canoe. The two got into that canoe and paddled across the swift river current to that island. And then Red Feather said, "The berries are not so good on this side of the island, but if you take that path and go to the other side, you will find wonderful berries. I will wait here for you." Swaying Reed thought, how generous, how nice of her. We're going to be really good friends. And she took her basket and took the path and reached the other side of the island and looked around, and to her surprise, she saw berries, but the berries were all white. White berries are not good for people to eat. They're good for the birds. There were no red berries, no black berries, none that were good to eat. She thought, "Oh, what a disappointment. My new friend will be sorry to hear this, but I will go back and tell her." And so she turned around, climbed to the path to the top of the hill in the middle of that island, looked down, and what she saw surprised her. For there was Red Feather in her canoe, already halfway back to the land, which was so far from that island, you could not be seen as you stood there on that shore. It took her a moment to realize what had happened. She had been abandoned there. Red Feather had not wanted to be her friend at all. What could I do? Swaying Reed thought. The river is wide here. The current is too swift for me to swim. I think the best thing I can do is just sit and wait, and maybe help will come to me. I have found that is often true. So she looked around, and the sun was just starting to go down in the sky, and it would soon be dark and cold, and she did not have anything to make a fire or time to make one, but she saw there by the water was a big old log that had washed ashore, and it was hollow, and she looked inside and thought, "Oh, this is good." She climbed into that log, and she could actually see through a knothole in the log out onto the beach next to her, and she fell asleep. She was wakened in the middle of the night, for she heard voices speaking outside that log. They were strange voices. Some were deep, some were high, but none of them sounded quite like people. And as she listened, she heard a voice say, "That one, she is stranded here on our island." And a second voice said, "What shall we do about this?" And a third voice said, "I think we should help her." And the first voice said, "Oh, that is a good idea. One of us will greet her in the morning. I could do that." Another voice, "Oh, brother, not you. You are too frightening. You should not do that." And then a soft voice spoke and said, "I will be happy to greet her in the morning and help her." The other voices said, "Oh, Juniquando, Juniquando, you are a good one for that. Juniquando, you may do that." Well, Swaying Reed looked out through that knothole to see what she could see, to see what Juniquando looked like, but all she could see were lights darting back and forth and then sweeping out across the river and disappearing. But she thought to herself, "Oh, this is good. Someone will help me." And so she went to sleep in that log and slept soundly all through the night. When the morning came, she crawled out and looked, and there, what she saw in front of her was a surprise, for there, by the side of the water, was a huge snake rising up with 2 horns on his head, but a kind look on its face. And she said, "Ah, are you Joniquando?" And the snake said, "Yes,
I have come to help you, for we have observed that you are always kind to others. My people have seen you, and so I have been chosen to bring you back to the other side." "Thank you," she said. "That is very kind of you. Now, crawl onto my neck and hold on to my horns." She did as he said. He bowed his head down, and she crawled onto his neck and grabbed hold of his horns, and he went into the water and began to swim. And he said, "As we travel, you must keep watch for me, for the thunder beings do not like me. They will try to kill me. So if you see a cloud, let me know." As they swam across that wide part of the river, she looked up in the sky. She said, "I do see a cloud, a small one, but it is far away." "Ah," Judy Quando said, "ah, then I must swim faster." They swam faster indeed. "What do you see now?" he said. She looked up. She said, "That cloud, it is getting much closer." "Oh," he said, "I must swim faster still." And he speeded up. And he said, "What do you see now?" And she said, "The cloud is right overhead." He said, "Oh, I must dive." And he dove down into the water just as thunder sounded. And Swaying Reed found herself in the water, but then realized as she put her feet down, the water was shallow and the shore was only a stone's throw away. She waded out and went back to the village. When she walked into the village, people came up to her. They said, "Swaying Reed, where were you? You were gone all night." She said, "Oh, I had a little problem, but someone helped me. Everything is good." Among those who were there was Red Feather. She waited to see if Swaying Reed would say anything about what she had done, but Swaying Reed did not say a word. Come, sit by the fire," people said. "Tell us what happened." And she told the story of what had happened. She told of how Jody Quando came and how he rescued her. And then she said, "And look at this." And she held out her hand. For she held in her hand a small piece of Jody Quando's horn that had broken off as it dove. "He gave me this, I think, as a gift." Oh, people were excited about that, for it was known that the horn of the great serpent who lives underwater is a great medicine, can cure people who are sick, and brings good fortune to anyone who has it. Red Feather, seeing all this, said to herself, "That should be mine. I am the one who should have that horn. This is not right. I know what I can do." And she walked back down to the river, to her canoe. She paddled out to that island. And then when she got to the island, she shoved the canoe out in the water and shouted, "Oh, look, poor me! I am caught on this island and stuck here. Someone must come and help me." And then she crawled into that log and waited. And when the dark came, she heard voices. "That one in the log, huh?" "Yes, what shall we do about that one?" "I think Jody Quando can take care of her." When the next day came, she walked out of that log, looked up, and there was Jody Quando. He said, "I am here." She said, "Good, bend down, let me get on your neck." And he did just that. Then she said, "Now, take me back to shore." And he began to swim. And as he swam, she took out a knife that she had brought with her, began trying to hack off a piece of his horn. As he swam, he said, "Do you see any clouds?" And she said, "Not yet, not yet." Still trying to hack off more of that horn. There was a cloud coming closer. "Do you see a cloud?" he said. "Not yet, not yet." Still unable to break off a piece of that horn. Then he said, "Oh, I see a cloud, I must dive." And he dove. And as he dove, she found herself in the middle of the river, being swept away by the current. She was never seen again. But Swaying Reed lived a long and happy life and helped many people with that gift of Jody Quando, the piece of horn from the underwater serpent. And that is how that Mohegan story, a very old story, goes. When we tell stories, we always tell them for two reasons. The first is to entertain people, but the second is to teach good lessons. You can learn much from a story. In fact, you may not even know what the lesson is of that story when you hear it, but because the story was so interesting, you will remember it. And the time may come when that lesson will be clear to you as a result of the story being told. One of the stories that we tell, in fact, among our Abenaki people, is the story of the drum. That long ago, we did not have the drum. It was not part of our culture. And at that time long ago, something had happened
much like what is happening today. People were not agreeing with each other. People were disagreeing. Sometimes they could not even remember what the disagreement was about, but still they were not cooperating. They were not sharing. They were speaking badly of each other. And in those days, in this one village, each lodge had a special talent. One group of people in this particular lodge, they were good at making canoes. In another lodge, they were good at catching fish. But did the people with canoes or the people who fished help each other? Onda. They would say, oh, those worthless fishing people. Those awful canoe people. They would not share anything with each other. And all through the village there were different gifts. Some were good healers. Some were good at growing crops. Some were good at singing songs. But did they share any of that with each other? Onda. They simply talked badly of each other and refused to do anything to cooperate. Now it is said that Klus Komba, who had been given the job from the great mystery Katsinawask, given the job of trying to make life better for the human beings, saw what was happening and realized something had to be done. And so it was, they say, that Klus Komba made the first drum. And he walked into that village with a drum in his hand, and as he walked, he sang. We got one day, 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 we got one day. Now the people, as they heard that drum being played, as they saw Klus Komba moving about, moving his feet, they thought, oh, that looks like fun. They came out of their lodges and they began to follow him, dancing, singing that song, and then they joined hands as they danced and sang, joined hands in a great circle, and when he ended that song, they looked around and realized everyone was smiling. Hands joined together was a good thing. And Klus Komba said, I give you this drum, I give you this song to remind you to join hands together. When we dance together and sing together, our hearts are full and glad. And so too, when we share and cooperate with each other, the same will be true. That song has been passed down to this day. We gai one day, and when I play it for young people and ask them, what do you think it means? They come up with all kinds of ideas. But the simple thing of that song is that we gai one day means only this. This is fun. This is fun. We gai one day. To cooperate, to share, is one of the best things that we as human beings can do. Now, the Native American flute has many stories that are told about it. In fact, one of the traditions which I've heard all through the continent, among Lakota people, among people on the west coast and the southeast and the southwest, and here in the northeast, is that the flute came to be when a woodpecker made holes in the hollow branch of a cedar tree that was broken off at the end, that branch, and the wind blowing over it made a sweet sound, which someone heard and realized they could turn that into a musical instrument. I'm going to share with you right now one of our Abenaki stories. By the way, Abenaki is how we say it in the language. Abenaki is how people often say it in English. It's like, parlez-vous français? Do you speak French? So it depends on sometimes what language you're speaking, the way one of our words might be said, although the traditional way is Abenaki, which is people of the dawn land. Ki is earth, Waban Oben means light, dawn, or sunrise. Now, long ago, there was one I've mentioned called Klus Komba. And Klus Komba did many great things to help the people. When the wind blew too hard, he tied the wings of the wind eagle and convinced it not to make such terrible winds. When a great monster called Aglabemu held back the waters by building a great dam, he is the one who turned that monster into a frog and broke open that dam. Again and again, Glus Gomba did great things to help the human beings. And the people appreciated him very much. Now back then he had a little friend who was one of his good friends, and this one named Musbas observed how Glus Gomba did things and followed him around everywhere. And Musbas also noticed something else. He saw that people were getting married. Back then, by the way, animal people and people were the same. The people and the animals were all one. And Musbas observed these animal people getting married and thought, oh, that's what I need. I need a wife to take care of me, to cook for me, and do everything I need doing. This was a very long time ago. And so Musbas decided he would find a wife. And he did it in his own way. I should say that he also did not have a very good voice, and he really didn't have many social skills. So he would simply walk up to the first woman he saw and say, hello, I am Musbas. Would you like to marry me? And that one would say to herself, Then she would say, I have something very important to do for the rest of my life. And she would continue on, leaving Musbas behind. Again and again he tried, and each time he failed until he reached the point he was so discouraged. He said, oh, I don't know if I want to get married at all. I don't know what I want to do. Now Glus Gomba saw how unhappy his little friend was and decided he would help him. And so Glus Gomba went into the forest. He took the branch of a cedar tree and he created a flute. And then he came back to Musbas. He said, my friend, I know you want a wife, so I'm going to help you. You see this here, this bekongan? If you play it, make songs with it by blowing into it and moving your fingers over the holes, you will make a song that will touch the heart of one of the women, and she will come and be ready to marry you. Oh, that is really good, Musbas said. And Glus Gomba said, just do not talk, just play the flute. So Musbas, he took that flute, he walked until he came to a clearing. He thought, I will try and see what happens. And so he lifted that flute up and he began to play. And then he stopped because he could hear wings whistling through the air, and there in front of him landed Lone Woman. He had played the song that touched her heart. She was ready to marry him. And he looked at her and thought, oh, Lone Woman, she'd be a good wife for me. She will catch fish for me. She wears a beautiful coat, too, black and white. But then he noticed, as she walked along, she was waddling back and forth like a duck. And he said, oh, then again, do I want to marry a duck woman? I was just practicing on this. I wasn't really serious. And he lifted up that flute to play a second time. And he broke the heart of Lone Woman. She flew off. To this day, you may see her in the midst of some wide pond. You may hear her call like that flute song. But Musbas paid no attention to that. He just played a second time. And this time when he stopped, he could hear someone coming towards him, coming through the forest, and he looked up, and what he saw was Deer Woman, just moving back and forth, gradually coming towards him, shyly making her way up to him, and he thought, oh, Deer Woman, she's good looking. She knows all the ways through the forest and the food to eat. She would be a good wife for me, but she's taking a long time getting here. And I'm a busy man. And not only that, I've only started playing this. I'm sure I could do better. And he lifted up that flute. As he did so, it broke the heart of Deer Woman. She ran back into the forest. To this day, it is very hard to get close to Deer Woman. But Musbas just played that flute another time.
And when he stopped, at first, he looked around. He saw nothing. Then he began to hear something coming through the forest, something really big, crashing through the brush and undergrowth. And there, out of the forest, came Bear Woman. And Bear Woman sat down in front of him and looked at him. And he knew she was ready to marry him. And he said, "Oh, Bear Woman, this is the best one so far. Look at her. She will defend me. She will get berries and fish and honey for me, and she will take care of me. This is really, really good. She'll be a great wife." But then again, he looked at that flute he still held, and the mind that he had then was twisted, for he thought, "Oh, I'm a gifted musician. I should not stop now. Who knows who I might get? I should have the best wife of all. I will just play one more time." And he lifted up that flute to play. As he lifted it up to play, Bear Woman saw what he was about to do. And instead of feeling hurt, she became disgusted. She lifted up one paw and crushed him under that paw, breaking the flute. When she lifted her foot up, out from under her paw ran the first weasel. With his little bent back where it was broken over that flute, he still runs through the forest to this day. Gluskomba saw what had happened. He came out of the forest and shook his head. He said, "Oh, I made a mistake. The minds of men are too weak to have any power over women. It is not right." So he put that flute back together again, and he put just a little bit of magic into it, so that if someone was really sincere and they made up a song for someone, they could win their heart. And to this day, that is how the flute may be used to play a courting song. In fact, the flute is often called the courting flute by many of our tribal traditions. And when you play a song that you've composed for someone, you put your heart into that song if you truly love them, and if they are worthy of your love and you're worthy of theirs, then that will be like a proposal of marriage, like an engagement ring. It may lead to the beauty of children. In fact, and this is even cooler, in our traditions, when someone has made a flute song and proposed with it and has managed to get married and they have children, that song belongs to the wife now. No more is it played on the flute. Instead, she composes words to it and sings it as a lullaby with a rattle for their children. Like this very old song, which comes from at least 7 generations ago. Aronis not kwasen, kwea, kwea, kwea ho. Aronis not kwasen, kwea, kwea, kwea he. Kwea he, kwea ho, kwea he, kwea ho, kwea, kwea, kwea he. Kwea, kwea, kwea. That is called the Penobscot Lullaby, and it was recorded on a wax cylinder over 110 years ago, and it was sung for an ethnologist who was then traveling through Maine and put it onto that wire recording. And it has been recently, within the last 20 years, returned to the Penobscot Nation because my son Jesse and a number of other people went to the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia, where they were sharing some of these recordings and songs and trying to identify where they came from. And that particular song, as I said, belongs to the Penobscot Nation. It's been returned, that Penobscot lullaby that was once a flute song, sung to win the heart by playing it on the flute of a young woman. In fact, my friend Kevin Locke, who is a great Lakota flute player, has told me that any song that we play on the flute, we can sing it, for our voices and the voice of the flute are connected together. So I'll conclude by sharing with you first that song I played on the flute one more time called Tutuwas, which means the little children or the babies, and then I will do it on the drums. You can hear it. So it sounds like this on the flute.
And then, if I take the drum and the rattle, sounds like this. Don't talk bullshit, don't you 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 Way high one me, oh, way high one me, oh, way high one me, oh, way high one me, oh. Woo! Ulioni ni dobak. Thank you for listening to me. Ulipam kani. Travel well. Uligawi. Uligwasi. Sleep well and dream well. Oh.